Hello, it's Richard and I'm back doing another repair session on these video Genie computers. I've had a few deliveries this week for some new components for the repairs, which I'm going to be fitting today. So we've got two drive belts that will hopefully, if my measurements are correct, fit the cassette deck on this machine and the other machine over there. It's quite hard to measure, but I found a guide suggesting you measure the path with a bit of string and then deduct 10% to allow for some tension in the band, and that got me about 225 millimeters, 70 millimeter diameter, which is how they're sold. So we'll see if those fit. Then I've also got 5 of these knobs. These are to go on the buttons at the back here. All 3 of my Genies are missing these buttons. They've fallen off over the years. Now it's 37 or 38 years since I last saw one of these on a working video Genie, but my memory of them is really quite clear. Just the feel and look of these as he pressed them, and this is 100% match as far as I can tell. Very, very close to the original, and they fit nicely. I've put one on there already. And the third one is this switch. So this is for this switch here that is broken off on this particular Genie. Sadly, it turns out I've got the wrong size. I thought I've got the right switch, but the pitch of the pins isn't quite right to fit on the circuit board. The plunger isn't long enough to reach out the back, and indeed it's slightly too small for the knob to fit on. So in this repair session, that's going to have to be left behind. So I'll probably reassemble this Genie still with the broken switch. It's not the end of the world. This is a reset button, which is quite useful. This one is switches video modes, so it switches it from a 64 character display to a 32 character display, split screen that's paginated, and you've got this page button on the keyboard. This wasn't on the TRS-80, it was there in the video Genie. The TRS-80 had something similar in software, and the video Genie simulates it in software in a different way. So in the 2 years that I grew up using one of these, I don't think we ever really used it. It's really not a particularly useful video mode. So I think I would just leave that for now. Maybe I'll come back at some date and fix it. So let's get these drive belts fitted in the 2 Genies and see if we can get programs saved and loading, ideally between the 2, see if we can get them set up, but it might be they only read back on their own ones depending on alignment of cassettes and so on. So yeah, let's have a go. Well, that was a damn sight easier than I expected. I thought I was going to have to unscrew all of these mechanics here to be able to get the drive belt onto that spindle, but it turns out that this that angled bracket there is kind of pressing down there's a kind of spindle on that big flywheel, and it goes into an indentation on that angled bracket, just kind of held in by friction, and with very gentle pressure you can just lift that angle bracket enough to squeeze the drive belt on and off. So we've got that all fitted, and here we can see it working. So we have play and fast forward and rewind, which was the one that didn't work before. And from the other side, play, going around slowly, going around fast, and rewind, go around fast, which is also activating the tape counter. The tape counter only goes off the left-hand reel, so without a tape in, it doesn't move in the other direction, but it will when it's being turned round. I think I'd better clean up all the tape path and the tape heads before I actually try saving some software on this. I've now cleaned up the insides of the tape deck, and yeah, lots of yucky stuff there. Clean the heads with alcohol. There's the new but drive belt versus the old one, showing how much the old one had stretched. But I've now been testing saving and loading programs, and it's not working, sadly. So I've got this cassette that came with this old machine. I've put that in my home hi-fi, and it does have data on it, but that's not loading into the machine. And I've tried recording onto a blank cassette, and when I save, the sound comes out of this speaker of this homebrew mod, but then when I put this in the hi-fi, there's nothing on it. So basically the data is not getting off the circuit board onto the tape, and it probably isn't coming off the tape onto the circuit board. This sound mod takes the sound off this chip, which is almost directly before it comes to the connector to the cassette deck. So I think the sound probably is getting into the cassette deck. And the troubleshooting guide in the service manual says for loading errors to look at this quad op amp pin 1 when you play back, and I'm getting nothing off that with a digital tester, not an analog. At least so yeah, so I think there's probably a problem in the cassette deck that's a little bit of a mystery to me. I think probably my next thing to do is to replace the drive belt in this Genie over there, see if that that cassette deck works. If it does, then try just swapping the cassette decks between the two machines and see what effect it has. That might allow me to narrow things down a bit. I've done a bit more investigation, and it's coming up quite frustrating, as a lot of these things tend to be. So the state of play seems to be this machine is outputting the sound signal to the cassette, because I can hear it on the speaker, but nothing is going onto a tape with this recorder, because I've tried playing back the tape on a hi-fi. On this machine, if I try and record something onto the tape with this deck, it does record onto the tape, although it's not a very good signal. It's a bit noisy, but it does record onto there. But again, it doesn't respond to anything coming back. It just ignores the recording that it recorded. I do have this old tape with a different recording on. It occasionally comes up with an FC error, which apparently is a function call error, a legal function call. So it's maybe getting some data off, but not the correct one. I've looked in the service manual. Initially I didn't think there was much about the cassette deck, but it's not too bad. It's got a whole thing about how it generates the signals and what the signals should look like, which if I had an oscilloscope I might be able to do a bit of debugging on. Sadly I don't. It's still on my wish list. And I didn't think there were schematics, but I eventually found, yeah, they were tucked away here with a separate section. So it's got simple arrays and mode things, and then this seems to be dealing with the signals. It's just got the read-write head, switches between read and write, and then it's on the right you've got a signal from the computer and an op amp and a variable resistor, and on the read it looks like you've got 3 op amps. And again, there's a, where is it, variable resistor up here to alter that. And in the more modern Genie, I found, actually may not be able to see it there, it's too dark, but there's on the circuit board there's 2 variable resistors as it describes. It's also got a 3rd variable resistor here, because it's got the view meter and the volume control, which you can adjust for better loading. But it's not obvious where that fits into the schematic. Incidentally, when I'm playing back data here, at most I'm getting about 2 or 3 on maximum volume, which suggests that the gain isn't enough, and I maybe need to play around with that. But on this one over here, on the circuit board, it's only got one variable resistor, and this is the older version without the VU meter, without the volume control. So I don't know whether it's missing the read or the write. I'd imagine it's probably just writing at full volume, and maybe that's variable resistors for the read. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit tricky for me to debug this without analog test equipment like an oscilloscope. But I might be able to do something with just a multimeter or a logic probe or something. Yeah, I'm going to have, as usual, go off and have a little think about this. So that's where we're at now. Again, bit of progress and new problems to be solved. It would be kind of exciting that having some a new problem to sort out and new area, some analog electronics again. But I'm slightly lacking the equipment that I'd like to be able to use for that. And also running out of time for this retro challenge, and I've got other stuff, I've got work that needs to be done. So I think my next one, I'm probably just going to have to close all up these machines and say, well, I've done the digital stuff and the analog stuff's going to have to wait. Slightly disappointing, but that's the way it goes, and gives me more to do on the next retro challenge maybe.